University of Chicago has released its 2024-2025 supplemental essay prompts, and here we are to discuss them today. My name is Craig Meister. I'm a college admissions coach. You can learn more about me and how you can work with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process on my website, which is collegemeister.com. And if you're interested in learning about whether or not you are or your student is on track for selective college admission in the United States of America, visit areyouontracktogetin.com. Again, that's areyouontracktogetin.com, at which you will complete a free 3-minute assessment. Your results will be emailed to you right away, and they will help you clarify whether or not you are or your student is on track for selective college admission in the United States of America. University of Chicago is known for its all the way out there essay prompts on its supplement. Chicago is a member of the Common App, so not only will you be completing most likely the Common App essay for Chicago, but you will also be completing 2 essays on the University of Chicago supplement. One of the essays doesn't change much from year to year. This is sort of the why Chicago essay, and I have a whole nother how to get into University of Chicago video where I discuss just that, how to get into University of Chicago overall. But today, I want to focus on the part of the supplement for University of Chicago for first-year applicants that changes every year, which is the section where you respond to one of these creative essay prompts. So you get to choose from. You can make one up, or you can look at past ones and just go hog wild on being your true University of Chicago self for University of Chicago. The issue is, of course, not everyone has the personality of University of Chicago. And so I have found when working with students who've applied to University of Chicago before that many try too hard to be cute, idiosyncratic, almost eccentric, and too creative, sort of by half in terms of how they approach the University of Chicago creative essay. And it's very clear that it's affected and fake. So what I would say first and foremost, before we even review these essay prompts, is pick the one that resonates with you the most. And don't be someone you're not just to feel like you're keeping up with the Joneses and like being as quirky as the prompt itself. I mean, you obviously can play around with it. You can have humor. Don't get me wrong. But if you're trying to just be weird for the sake of being weird and sort of meeting Chicago at its level of weirdness in terms of these prompts, because you feel like you need to fit in, that's not going to work out. So try to be authentically who you are. And remember, you have the option of responding to a prompt you create yourself if none of them really resonate with you. And you can also look back to the back catalog of prompts that Chicago has asked applicants to consider in the past for this creative response. And you can respond to one of them as well. The lovely thing about University of Chicago supplement is that both of the essay prompts that you're responding to, at least traditionally, I'm not sure because the 24-25 admissions cycle has not really started when I'm doing this video, so I'm not exactly sure about the actual functionality of the Common App supplement for Chicago, but at least in the past, on the supplement, University of Chicago has allowed you to upload the responses to both of your essay questions. Both the Chicago, sort of the more traditional staid University of Chicago essay prompt and also the more creative out there one. And so just again to clarify, the more traditional one is how does the University of Chicago as you know it satisfy your desire for a particular kind of learning, community, and future? Please address with some specificity your own wishes and how they relate to UChicago. I'm not going to give any tips on that really at length today other than to say that you get to upload this traditionally. So there's not an official word count limit, which I love. This is how it used to be on a lot of essays on the Common App and elsewhere where you just upload a document. Now, since technology has advanced and they want equity and everything, there's been, you get to copy and paste your responses in most supplements into a little box. And you can't go over this number of words or characters. But Chicago is one of the last holdouts, and maybe, again, it won't be in 24-25, but I think from everything I'm gleaning, it will be still, where they allow you to actually upload a document, and if you go to 675 words, that's okay. If you go to 703 words, that's okay. If you go to 593 words, that's okay. And so you can upload your response. Just when you do respond to that first more traditional prompts, basically the why Chicago, you got to get specific. don't write that in such a way where you could write it to Wesleyan or you could write it to any other school. It's got to be hyper specific to the opportunities that exist at Chicago and your wishes for for your experience as an undergrad, and not just for 4 years as a learner and a community member at Chicago, but also, maybe even in the future beyond when you graduate. Like, what will your experience at Chicago help you do, and satisfy you in such a way so that you're going to be happy well beyond the time you even graduate. So get as specific as you can with that response. And like I said, if you want to respond in 500 words to that one and you have done a really good job, 500 words is okay. If you feel like 800 words is what it requires, or maybe even 900, that is getting a little bit big for me, but you can do that okay as well. At least traditionally, they allow you to upload a response to both prompts that you choose. This is a required one, so you can upload that document. I recommend generally keeping it single-spaced on one page. I think once you've gone on to a second page for either response, you've shown a lack of discipline and ability to to edit. You try to, your thoughts really for these responses, the creative one and the more traditional one, if you're going on to the 2 pages single-spaced, I feel like you're going too much. And that's my opinion. It's just my opinion. So try to keep it single-spaced on 1 page max. Most of my successful applicants to Chicago do 2/3 of a page to 1 page single-spaced on Google or Word document for both the Chicago responses. Some have been as short as a half-page single-spaced, but that's very low for the Why Chicago one, or the one that's called How Does Chicago, as you know it, satisfy your desires for a particular kind of learning, community, and future. Please address with some specificity your own wishes and how they relate to UChicago. Again, I would say that the shortest you would want to do is a single-page, half-page single-space on that one. But again, I think that needs to be a traditionally structured essay with a thesis, with a body to support the thesis, with a conclusion that says something new. And again, it should be at least single-spaced half-page. At most, a whole page single space. Now, in terms of the creative ones, let's talk about these, because these are fun, and it is something that, you get a lot of variety here, so don't feel like you need to respond to one that just doesn't make any sense to you. And it's very likely that if you're a normal person, but not everyone, normal is, what do they say? Normal is a setting on the washing machine, right? So no one is normal, but one of these is probably going to rub you the wrong way or make no sense to you, at least. But if you like all of these, then I think you were built for Chicago, because you get their humor, or at least whoever's curating this list. But here are the actual second prompts that you get to choose from. We're all familiar with green-eyed envy or feeling blue, but what about being caught purple-handed or tickled orange? Give an old color-infused expression a new hue and tell us what it represents. Basically, what you're to do with this one, to just translate this into sort of colloquial language, is take an old maxim or saying and swap out one of the colors. So again, being caught red-handed, they swapped it out in this prompt for being caught purple-handed. But it's got to be something that's sort of applicable to your true story. Something that maybe has happened to you that's funny or interesting or illustrative of who you are, what you value, or just something you've often thought about or feel like would be an upgrade on the saying or the maxim. You can take it any number of directions, because they basically say, give an old color-infused expression a new hue and tell us what it represents. That basically means like you can run with it in any creative way you want. Again, I think the most natural way to run with it would be maybe something actually happened to you where maybe your hand turned purple or something. I can't even think of other color-related sayings right now, but maybe it's as easy as black and white. Maybe it's as easy as red and blue. I don't know. But you run with it the way you want. And these are creative. And the thing about the creative ones, I still personally like the traditional setup of an intro with a thesis, a body, and then a conclusion. But if there was ever a time where you didn't have to do that, You can just tell an organic, interesting story that has a surprise ending. You can have any number of creative approaches to responding to this type of essay prompt, but you do want to fully tackle the prompt and feel like by the end they understand what's going on. If you're too abstract, if you're too cutesy, and you haven't fully responded and they don't know what the actual maxim is by the end, you failed, in my opinion. So make sure it's very clear as early as possible, or at least, maybe you're building up to it in a climactic conclusion, what your new color maxim is, if you respond to this one. But otherwise, be you. I mean, this is a great way to be you. And that's why they have these very creative essay prompts. Essay option number 2, but I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now, end quote. Bob Dylan. In what ways do we become younger as we get older? So that is very interesting. What you see here also on your screen are the students who have submitted these prompts. So that one was submitted by a student named Joshua Harris from the class of 2016. But the first one was submitted by Ramsey Bottorff, excuse me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, from the class of 2026 at Chicago. So again, another really interesting one that makes your mind think. And if you're a thinker and that resonates with you, run with it. And again, I recommend no more than 1-page single space. That's my max. In terms of font size, just so you know, I would not go less than 10-point font, just to be very clear. But, you can keep it 11 or 12 single space too. That's okay too. Option 3, Pluto, the demoted planet. I don't even know how to pronounce this next word. Ophiuchus, the 13th zodiac. If I pronounce that wrong, I just clearly don't follow the zodiac signs quite enough, do I? Don't do enough reading about this. Andy Murray, the 4th to tennis's big 3. Every grouping has something that doesn't quite fit in. Tell us about a group and its unofficial member. Why or why not should it be excluded? So there used to be on Sesame Street a song, and one of these kids is doing his own thing. One of these kids is not the same. That's what it makes me think of. And so that is a cute little prompt, right? Again, if that resonates with you and you feel like you're excited to share and tell a story, then run with it. If this does not make any sense to you, don't feel compelled to respond to one and force a square peg into a round hole, because that's, again, the biggest issue I see with early drafts of Chicago essays in response to these wild prompts is that kids try to get just as wild, but they're not. They're not that wild, and so they're not that creative in some cases. And it comes off as affected, and you don't want it to come off as affected. So again, if this doesn't resonate with you, if that makes you can't even think like this, you can't think of one of these sort of groupings where someone's doing their own thing but sort of fits, then just skip this one and choose one of the other options. Option 4 is Daddy-O, far out, gnarly. The list of slang terms goes on and on. Sadly, most of these aren't so fly anymore, as if name an outdated slang from any decade or language that you'd bring back and explain why you totally dig it. Well, that's a fun one to me, because I love sayings and maxims and such. And so I'd really vibe with that response if it was me responding, and if I was much younger than I am now. But I am not going back to University of Chicago or any college for that matter as a student. So this is on you at this point. But I like that one because, again, you have so much freedom. You pick a saying, a slang term, basically, and say why you really like that one, and maybe even tell a story about a time that really aligns well with that particular slang term or saying from a particular decade, whether it be a recent decade or something far, far in the past. So you basically, it's a fun language game because, if you know some fun words, that you feel like you use a lot in your daily conversations, but other people don't, that could also be worth putting the spotlight on for this particular response. I mean, you watch my videos, you may know I like certain words that I use quite a bit that are relatively rare in the general population. And I remember when I was reading Shakespeare in high school and I was doing math problems in a different math class at the same time, I would sometimes use words from Shakespeare in my problem solving. I forget what the word was. It was sort of like thus, but it was some other word for thus. But in my doing my math problems, you know how the teachers make you do the words and you have to like explain how you got to the math answer. I would start infusing it with sort of the old-fashioned words for thus, or I forget what the word was, but that just shows, I was really into that at the time. Maybe I should have gone to University of Chicago. Just so you know, I did actually visit University of Chicago when I was your age, and I was looking at it, and I liked a lot about University of Chicago, but I don't think I ultimately would have fit in there because while I consider myself smart, I don't necessarily feel as though, especially at the time, I didn't feel as though I was like a big lover of big ideas at the time. And so I felt like I would have been a little bit of fish out of water. Um, but in some ways, I feel like Chicago is a more intriguing value proposition as a university than ever before because many other colleges have watered down their curricula in such a way over the last 25 years that University of Chicago, I think, really is a great place if you are a smart, intellectual person and you want to wrestle with big and small ideas, concrete and abstract. So I'm a big fan of University of Chicago. I was not then, when I was your age, for situational reasons too. Like I think we went into a cab and I think I lost my glasses or something and I got all flustered. And I took that as a sign that maybe I shouldn't go to Chicago. I don't know, like these little things like play on you when you're younger. I really also like Northwestern. I love Northwestern. And I will say that it's relatively rare if you're doing your due diligence to really love both Northwestern and Chicago. They attract different types of students. And I definitely liked Northwestern. I mean, that was much more my vibe at the time. And I think still to some extent today, I like schools like Northwestern. My personality, I think, fits in well with those schools. I was looking at schools like Northwestern and the like, if you will, sort of schools that were liberal arts, but also pre-professionally focused, whereas Chicago is a great place to just expand your mind. It is also obviously sets you up very well pre-professionally too. Don't get me wrong these days, particularly in certain fields, but you're signifying you're a very smart person when you go to University of Chicago. And these prompts are also sort of your appetizer or your first foray into sort of the way in which Chicago wants you to think critically about big ideas, small ideas, fun ideas, serious ideas, and everything in between. So that's enough about me. In any case, essay option number 5. How many piano tuners are there in Chicago? What is the total length of chalk used by UChicago professors in a year? How many pages of books are in the Regenstein Library? These questions are among a class of estimation problems named after University of Chicago physicist Enrico Fermi. Create your own Fermi estimation problem, give it your best answer, and show us how you got there. Some students reading that would be like, what the heck? Like, what the actual heck? Many University of Chicago applicants who really fit in with Chicago will read that prompt and they're like, oh, I love this. I exactly know what I want to write. And so that's a good sign. I think that's a good sign that you're probably someone who would thrive in a University of Chicago education. If you're like me and read that and like, what the heck is this? Probably again, it's maybe a sign that you need to chill a little bit, which I would argue I I need to chill too. But and be a little bit more roll with the personality of Chicago with these prompts. But if you like that one, again, that's going to either be something you just love or you just hate, I think. I don't think you're going to have a middle feeling with do you want to respond to that as your creative essay. But I like that. I like it. It's creative. Again, they're very good at curating this list of essay prompts. And I'll show you some of the past prompts too in a minute. But then the final prompt this year is, as always, the classic choose your own adventure option. In the spirit of adventurous inquiry, choose one of our past prompts or create a question of your own. Be original, creative, thought-provoking. Draw on your best qualities as a writer, thinker, visionary, social critic, sage, citizen of the world, or future citizen of the University of Chicago. Take a little risk and have fun. Now, I am a huge opponent of creating your own essay prompt on the Common App, the main essay. But for the average to above average UChicago applicant, I think that they can handle it. And so if you feel like none of these other prompts resonate with you, but you have a really focused, quirky, interesting prompt that you feel like is important for you to share that story, then roll with that. Do that. Try it your best. I don't think you again, should necessarily take unnecessary risks and just be different for the sake of being different. So if you like one of the other prompts, I would opt for that first. But if you feel like you want to share or tell and show and tell a particular story that you feel like you'd be better able to share if you literally created another prompt, more power to you. As you see, some of these classic questions from the past, exponents and square roots, pencils and erasers, beta decay and electron capture, name two things that undo each other and explain why both are necessary. That was fun. Where have all the flowers gone? Pete Seeger. Pick a question from a song, title, or lyric and give your best answer. And here's one that was creative. What can actually be divided by 0? Do you feel lucky? Well, do ya, punk? Eleanor Roosevelt. Misattribute a famous quote and explore the implications of doing so. So as you see, again, University of Chicago has its own personality. And, they, in a world that's so vanilla, it's important to have a University of Chicago still because so much in higher education and just the world in general is all homogenized. And University of Chicago is the antithesis of homogenized. And I think their essay prompts every year prove that. And so I think that you should roll with it, have fun. Do try to show your writing ability in both of your responses on University of Chicago's supplement, but also on the Common App essay. They are writers at Chicago because they are thinkers at Chicago. And one's ability to write clearly is a window into one's ability to think clearly. So don't just rush this out on Halloween for an early deadline at Chicago. Really take the time to ruminate on what you want to write in response to any writing that's going to go to Chicago, but particularly their supplemental essay prompts. The one for why basically Chicago is extremely important. Just because I didn't talk about it as much as these other quirky ones does not mean it's not important. I would argue almost it's more important because you are explicitly and directly indicating the fit there. Whereas with the second one, the one you choose for your creative response is much more, get to know the person and how your mind works in relationship to something that can be completely disembodied from, why you want to go to Chicago. So it's more creative and sort of biographical in some senses than the more businessman-like essay, which is sort of prove the fit. But I think they're both extremely important. And so for Chicago, thinking clearly and writing clearly are really critical so they understand the way your mind works. And all of our minds really do work differently. And many students don't even realize this going into their 12th grade year in high school because, again, they've experienced basically an education system where teachers tell them this is right, this is wrong. If you draw outside the lines, you get a lower grade. Chicago is much more receptive to the idea that all of us have sort of genius in us. And it's a matter of harnessing that genius in a way that demonstrates the University of Chicago how you would be able to navigate Chicago in a meaningful and successful way for others and yourself if you brought that genius there. But also, who is the person behind the student? This is the creative essay. And do we like this person, basically? Is it someone who is just be fun to have a meal with in a dining hall or have a late night conversation with in a dormitory? And so that sort of has to be in the back of your mind as you're creating your responses to both of these responses, but particularly this creative essay, because the first one is much more about why you should be a part of the community and why you have eyes only for this community above other communities, University of Chicago. The second is much more, do we like you? Would we want to hang out with you? And again, don't try to be someone you're not. That is really key. Chicago likes all types, as long as they're smart and as long as they, can communicate and think clearly. So be who you are. And I think you're going to be in a good shape there. Now, I will say one more thing, which is I am offering a new product, which is called my pre-read. This is new for the 24-25 admission cycle. Let's say you are unable or unwilling to work with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process, but you would like to get my feedback on your University of Chicago application before you submit it, or maybe you only learn about this opportunity after you submit it. And you just want to get a sense from yours truly whether or not there are potential ways that you could improve your application, or, you know, how I read it, basically, what I would take from different sections of your overall application to University of Chicago. Well, I do now offer something known as my pre-read. And I encourage you to consider whether or not this is a product that you would be interested in purchasing from me, because I think it's very valuable. Otherwise, I would not offer it. And specifically, once you finish your Common App and you want to know if it's as strong as possible and whether or not in its current condition your chances of admission are impressive, inconclusive, or inadequate, that's when you should seriously consider getting my pre-read. Getting my pre-read now means having me review your entire application, just like an admissions officer or admissions committee will review it later, and receiving by email no later than the time you reserve on my site a report highlighting what's working and what's not on your full Common App, and in this case, your University of Chicago Common App Supplement. If you've yet to submit your Common App, my pre-read may motivate you to make adjustments to it before your deadline. If you've already submitted your Common App, my pre-read will prepare you for what I deem to be your likely admissions outcome at, in this case, University of Chicago. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't want to wait till the very end and get my pre-read and that be it, you may want to work with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process, in which case I would recommend going to collegemeister.com. But for my pre-read, guess what? It's so easy. All you have to do is go to mypreread.com and you can learn more and purchase my pre-read there. Again, mypreread.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and most importantly, stay stress-free throughout the entire college admissions process.